why are you looking for meaning in the first place? Like, why do we have this need to create this question of like, what is my purpose or what is meaning? And then you realize that like, it's actually a very arbitrary thing. And so what that lets you do is then, because you agree that there's no like inherent well-defined answer to this question, it gives you the freedom to define what that means for yourself.
So Adam, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thanks for having me.
So have you seen what's going on with PayPal recently?
No, I haven't. What's going on?
Okay, so basically it's like from what I've seen on Twitter and in some of the news outlets, basically they had a change in their terms and conditions saying that they can now take, I think, $2,500 directly from PayPal customers' like accounts if they say something on social media that like represents misinformation. So basically it was like, the way people took it on Twitter was that if you say something on Twitter or Instagram or whatever that PayPal disagrees with, they could theoretically like dock money from your account because of that.
Wait, how does that work legally? That sounds like it's messed up.
The whole point is that it's in their terms and conditions.
And it has been, or they just like changed it?
They just changed it, I think.
So what happens if I already had an account and I didn't agree to that yet, right?
I guess now you have to agree to their terms and conditions to continue using it. Like they make you click agree. Otherwise, your PayPal account's basically rendered useless.
But you always agree to terms and conditions, right?
Technically, yes. So that's like also a problem. If people hadn't caught this.
Oh, so this was like randomly in there?
This was
like
updated. It was updated in
this, or they just like slid it in there?
No. They announced it. I got an email. And then it was like all over Twitter. It was all over like some of the business like news accounts.
Huh.
Jeez, that's messed up. That's pretty like, I don't even know how I feel about that. It feels like the fact that they're even able to do that is just a messed up part of like how the system works.
That brings us to like the point of where DeFi and a lot of crypto kind of has a really good argument for, which is what does it look like to take power back from like these centralized institutions?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple factors here. So one is like, how big of a problem is this? And that's kind of a debatable thing because yes, PayPal is able to do this where they can censor people and like censor them from social media presence and stuff like that. But then also they provide a lot of value from being centralized. So I think the difficult thing here, and I'll say like the obvious thing we'll think when we see this type of situation is, oh, can we make this system decentralized? And that would prevent issues like this where centralized systems can just cause censorship or take advantage of their power. That's obviously messed up. But I think the counterpoint of that, which people don't really talk about as much, is what are the benefits that are being provided by the centralized system here? And is it possible to get those benefits in a decentralized way? And I think in a lot of cases, it's actually a lot more difficult of a problem than it seems to make decentralized systems that carry with the same benefits as the centralized ones. So like one example of that is in Peter Thiel's book, 0 to 1, which is like a classic startup.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time. Yeah,
it's like Sigma Male Grind Set book. It's
I never heard it. I don't like the book anymore. Now that you said it like that, I hate it.
I've never heard it described like that.
I've never read the book in my life.
Yeah, but so in there he talks about kind of these big moats that large centralized corporations can have, and that's how you build like a successful long-term technology product. And so one example of that is like this thing called economies of scale. Where you basically, because you have such massive scale, you can get pricing and efficiency of different parts of your process down like super efficient and make it cheaper for everyone. And so that's like just an example of something that is inherently a property of centralized systems and centralized companies that you really don't get if you build it in a decentralized way, or at least there's not an obvious way to do that right now. So the reason I bring up that example is when there's censorship and stuff like that, it's easy to think about, is there a way to make a decentralized system to do this? But I think there's a lot of barriers in the way of that. It's definitely an interesting problem, but it's not as straightforward as like it seems on initial glance.
So I guess right now you're starting to see a lot of, let's say alternatives, right? Like there's Skiff for like decentralized email. And I don't know, for example, there's Thirdweb, which you're a part of, which is building like the infrastructure layer similar to what Stripe or AWS is doing. Have we seen anything like that happen for PayPal?
I've definitely seen a couple companies pop up around decentralized payments, or I think the concept of decentralized payments, like we have to define what that actually means, right? So like if you look at why PayPal exists, the reasoning, this is from my speculation, is like you have banks and these are super slow systems that hold your money. And so is there a way that you can kind of take the money securely out of banks and make them a little bit more like transportable? In other words, like I can send it to you more easily than waiting for like a bank transfer. And that's the problem that I see PayPal kind of solving. So if you look at the analogous in the Web3 world, there isn't even really this initial problem that PayPal is solving
True.
because like there isn't really a restriction on like crypto transfer or stuff like that. That's kind of one of the benefits that comes with it is like you can already transfer crypto directly instantaneously. That's the whole point of the system. So my question then is like, what does it even look like for a decentralized PayPal? Does that mean like solving the typical money like USD transfer problem, except in a decentralized way? And then that begs the question like, what does that even look like? Because it's not crypto based.
And is that the future of DeFi? Like, is that why DeFi should exist?
I think there's a lot of reasons why DeFi should exist. So one is, like the transferability of like decentralized currency is far higher and it's a lot more free to use. I think a lot of the other, like there's lots of other reasons why DeFi should exist. So one of the most classic examples is like current lending systems, sort of like something that people don't really think about too much unless you're actually using it or you're like in the finance industry. But it actually turns out that they like are extremely important for economic efficiency and like the financial systems of any country. And they're responsible for a lot of progress just because of how efficient they are, how efficient it is to lend out money while you're storing it.
Yeah.
And so when you look at those systems, tons of people are denied from them just because since you have the centralized authority gating who can actually take out loans, like you lose a lot of the efficiency from loans that you could be giving out because people are being like, there's like discrimination, there's all kinds of factors that are preventing that type of thing. So, and that's just falls under the box of censorship. And so the nice thing about DeFi systems is if you can create a way to give out loans, for example, without that type of censorship, then it's actually a far more efficient system. Besides just like equity, which is also an important benefit, it's far more efficient because the more loans you can make safely, like as in they're actually going to be paid back, it's just way more efficient for the entire economy.
So right now, what do you use PayPal for?
I mean, I just use it the same as most people, which is just you have some money sitting in there. Like if you're paying your friends back or something, it's like Venmo, an extension of Venmo.
And so now if there was an easier way to interact with, let's just say blockchain transactions, like Venmo on your phone, but it's for blockchain, would you still use PayPal if all your friends had this app?
No, yeah, I think this is a good point actually. So one thing I overlooked before is maybe one of the other most useful use cases of PayPal is more like transfer money between friends. Like I'm paying you. It's the same thing as like what I would use Venmo for.
Right.
So absolutely, if there was like a crypto app where I could just send you crypto instead and everybody just was completely fine holding crypto, then yeah, that would just nullify the need for something like PayPal for me.
For you, right. And then I'm trying to think about like, okay, what do other people use PayPal for? A lot of people get their salaries through PayPal, especially like online contractors or people who work on Fiverr.
Yeah.
Same concept. If they were able to take money in and it was all crypto, would that also negate the use for PayPal?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of crypto companies working on this problem where like there's DAO payments tools and it's basically like tooling for companies to pay their employees in crypto instead of in USD or like whatever the native currency is. And that actually solves a lot of like, granted that there's some legal overhead that needs to be done as far as like taxes and other things like that, but it solves a lot of like international currency exchange and convenience issues as well.
So if I want to now be basically completely decentralized, what does my tech stack look like if I don't want to interact with any centralized institution? So no more Robinhood, no more even Coinbase, PayPal, all of that out the window. What am I using?
I think decentralization is limited to whatever infrastructure actually supports it. So like if we're talking like US dollars or something like that and you want to interact with your actual bank, it's a little bit more difficult, right? Because the entire system is built on centralization.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of like the process of what does the stack look like for my entire life to be decentralized honestly takes a lot of like infrastructure changes too. So like it's not really possible right now. There's some areas like, for example, if you take the banking example, there's a couple of companies working on, for example, USDC credit cards. So like you'll be able to hold USDC in like a effective bank account and spend it with a credit card, which is pretty sick. But things like that don't exist for every area. So like there's not yet really decentralized voting for like an election or like for the president or something. It's like the system just doesn't use it yet. And so it's a function of like as these systems increasingly incorporate decentralization, assuming that that's actually a benefit to the system because that's what it's going to take, then your life will be able to become more and more decentralized.
If you want to be even less extreme, then if someone wants to just become bankless, right? Just no banks. Obviously, you still vote, what does that look like then? Just all of your money is basically decentralized.
Okay. There's a couple of options there. I think stablecoin is obviously the safest one, although even that is kind of debatable.
Which one?
If I had to choose, I would say USDC. I would honestly go with centralized versus decentralized stablecoins right
No
now.
algorithm-backed stablecoins.
Yeah, no algorithmic. I would say if you're looking into algorithmic stablecoins, there's some that like a couple bad apples ruin the bunch. Like not all algorithmic stablecoins are bad. I think there's a lot that are actually very well designed. Like I would say there's this protocol called Liquidity. It's probably fourth or fifth biggest DeFi protocol as far as volume right now. And they have their own stablecoin called LUSD. Super well engineered and well designed mechanism. I would say that's a very like secure, well designed stablecoin that I would put money into. It's algorithmic, so same type of risk. I mean, the nice thing about centralized stablecoin is from USDC is like it's a huge org. They're kind of de-risked at this point. Like they've raised hundreds of millions of dollars. Big names trust them. So it's almost just like another bank. I'm not sure if they're regulated or not, but the great thing about it is you can put all of your money in USDC, which is still liquid to US dollars. So there's not really too much risk there unless you think the entire org is going to fail. But then you can go like yield farm on it and do DeFi on it. So you could basically basically zero risk, use your money for yield, assuming that you trust the systems are not going to entirely fail.
How do you vet that? Because Luna, was it Luna?
Yeah.
That collapsed. And that was either a stable coin or backed by a security, right?
Yeah. So
I guess you can explain it better than me, but how do you see that?
So Luna was another algorithmic stablecoin. And so what it means algorithmic versus non-algorithmic is like an algorithmic stablecoin is backed by a decentralized system, which means it's entirely code based. And so if the code has some kind of loophole through it or some way to like break it, then the entire system can break and nobody can do anything about it because the code is law there. And so often what happens, and we've seen this a couple times, is that the code will look like it's working for the majority of use cases. And maybe it does, but someone will find like a little loophole, which is what happened in the Terra Luna case. And it didn't get caught before, and they'll just exploit it and destroy the entire system. And then nobody can do anything about it because it's code. So like there's no legal system to be like, actually, no, the government's going to go reimburse your money here. It's just like, there's nothing you can do about it. That's why centralized is a little bit different. Like, so non-algorithmic stablecoins, USDC, USDT are examples of them.
Yeah.
They're literally just like a legal organization that's saying, we'll give you this ERC20 token, like a coin on chain, and then we'll let you exchange it for $1. So if their organization goes down, then you're done. Like your money's not worth anything. So it's just the way you evaluate those, which is a lot.
What do you mean your money's not worth anything?
Like if you get a ton of USDC, right?
Yeah.
The only thing that's giving USDC's value is that the USD, like Circle organization, which is the organization that made USDC, they're saying for anyone with USDC, we'll always allow you to exchange one USDC for $1.
Yeah.
So that's why that's why it has value.
Yeah.
So if Circle fails as an org, or it turns out that they're corrupt and they stop doing that, which they could technically do, then USDC would no longer have any value. So it's completely centralized.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it's a trade-off there, but that's why I'm saying sort of a debatable, but I think centralized is safer right now, which is kind of ironic in that specific domain, given that it's crypto.
Interesting. And then, so you would use kind of stable coins as like the actual form of currency. And then what are some of the like apps you would use?
Ooh, I think I like to play around with DeFi, especially more so like a lot of the crashes happened and I sort of stopped playing around with too much stuff. But I think Liquidity is a good one to use because I like trust the system. That's why I would say one thing to do before you are using any of these apps is you need to make sure you understand how it works really, really well. So you can evaluate for yourself what are the different holes that like could be an issue in the system. And that's not the easiest thing to do. But it's definitely necessary. Like I think DeFi is still pretty early stages in the sense of everything that seems like it may be okay is just like a strength in numbers thing. Like it's like thousands of people are using it, so therefore it should be fine if I use it. But it turns out that like a lot of these systems end up breaking. And so it's like no man's land right now. I would say like DeFi has a lot of room it's a great promise for what it could do. A lot of it has a lot of room to go before the safety and the UX is actually where it needs to be for typical population.
So UX, that's a good point actually. So I've seen the ads for a project and it seems pretty interesting. It's called Fire, I think. It basically just tells you what would be happening on your wallet transaction. So to like write it out in like layman's terms, basically. Why do you think that now, after a year of people talking, or actually multiple years of people talking about like, oh, the UX has to be better in crypto, why do you think it still hasn't gotten better?
I think it's a difficult problem. And I think there's a lot of people working on it. They're approaching it all from different angles. And the issue is that it hasn't been standardized. So I think one of the biggest pieces of UX in crypto is wallets. And wallets, there's like tons of issues with wallets right now. Wallet is like the entry point to doing anything with crypto. That's like
Yeah.
what actually holds your assets and how you interact with the blockchain and stuff. And I just think there's lots of people working on wallets and there's lots of people making really good changes. Like there's those people, there's a couple companies doing this thing where it's like what you said about Fire, where they're like making transactions more human readable, or people are creating different ways of like securing your private keys, stuff like that. But unfortunately, because there's so many of them, it's really hard for like regular users to come in and see like, okay, what do I actually want to use? What's trustworthy? And so I still see like most people end up defaulting to the standard options that were standard when crypto started, which is like MetaMask. And MetaMask really hasn't changed much. And so that's the experience that most people have is like, yeah, old crypto experience.
Or Wax, right? Was Wax one of them?
I haven't heard of
I
Wax.
haven't heard of Wax.
I use it to buy baseball NFTs. It was a really tough process.
When was this?
So it was a year ago.
Oh, this is recent.
Yeah, then they made us buy Wax, which was
Wax is
Wax is a token or the wallet?
token.
Oh,
I don't even
okay.
know what that is.
And
Yeah,
then
no,
we needed to link it to a wallet.
What wallet did you use?
MetaMask.
Okay.
That was
that's it.
MetaMask.
Yeah.
But it was just it took so long. It was such a process where it's like it's almost like can we please use our credit card? Like why are we doing this?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess for context for the audience, you're the founding engineer at Thirdweb.
Yes, that's true.
That is true. So what is Thirdweb doing differently when it comes to UX?
Yeah, so we definitely take that into account. Like, I think the main framework we use here, and there's a lot of like little specifics, is just when we're looking at the UX of who is actually using us and what are they actually using it for. We want to make sure that all of the flows are taken care of. That's kind of like standard thinking there. But an example of that is for the wallet problem, for example. And I think this is still very much an unsolved thing because we haven't built out our own wallet, but we want to make sure that the flows of using every different type of wallet are supported. And so we have on our website, for example, you can connect with not just MetaMask, but like a huge amount of wallets through this thing called Wallet Connect. And then we also support Coinbase, Rainbow, all these popular wallets. And then we've also done two things, which I would say are pretty interesting on the UX side, just in that wallet point. And so the two things are we've supported this thing called Magic Link. And what that lets you do is instead of connecting a wallet and using your private key, which is the typical crypto flow, you can actually sign in with your email instead. So it's just like a typical like log into any app. And the way that works is that you log in with your email and it creates like a wallet for you on the back end, but you never actually have to interact with that. So that's like a significant UX improvement in the sense of you never have to actually sign transactions or do anything like that. It does all of it for you.
Do you have the option of interacting with your wallet if you want to?
Yeah, you do. So there's like an API that you can use to interact with your wallet. It's in practice, it's a little bit.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. How long has Magic Link been around?
It's a pretty big company now. I've known about it for at least maybe 2 or 3 years, so probably longer than that.
Interesting. And then I don't know if you're allowed to talk about this, but why haven't you guys at Thirdweb yet built out a wallet?
I'm not sure what I can say there, but it's not like a priority right now. I think a lot of like good teams are working on it. But definitely like the way we think about Web3 is any tools that people need to build with Web3, we will eventually be providing those tools. And so wallet is definitely one of those things. So if it turns out that like nobody has solved the wallet problem and there's space for us to do that, we're definitely open to like solving any of those problems.
Interesting. So I wanted to actually talk a lot about Thirdweb, but to back up, how did you in the first place kind of join the founding team of Thirdweb?
Yeah. So this started back in freshman year of college, towards the end of freshman year of college.
What year was this?
1.5 years ago.
So 2020?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was actually working in machine learning at that point, and working on a couple side projects. And I saw this Twitter post by Sean Puri, and it was for this community called Next Gen. And the whole premise of it was basically community of young like builders and founders. And every week they were going to bring someone who's either made a company with over $100 million of revenue or 100 million users. And they were just going to bring them on and these kids could kind of interact with them, talk to them.
It was called Next Gen?
Yeah, it's called Next Gen. Yeah, just like Arib's and Aleem's new.
Yeah, I was like, wait, there's another one of those right now.
Yeah, so
Okay.
two of our friends, for context, founded another thing called Next Gen recently, which is like a community for young builders and founders.
Okay.
Okay, so you saw the tweet.
Yeah, so I saw the tweet, engaged with it, and like commented my own stuff. I commented like my AI article or something like that. And yeah, eventually got into that community. And so it turns out that community was in the Founders Inc. Discord. So
Interesting.
yeah, that's how I got connected with everyone. For context, Furkan, who's the founder of Founders Inc., is also he was the person who originally reached out to me, and we were kind of just talking about building out NFT projects as like a side thing. It was like an incubator initially called NFT Labs, and so that's how Thirdweb started. Is just four of us hacking on NFT projects together. Yeah.
So of all the people in Furkan's network, why do you think he reached out to you specifically?
Honestly, not sure. I mean, I had talked to him before because I was starting a company with one of my other friends. So I had gotten advice for him on that. So I guess I was in his general, like, he knew of my existence.
Okay,
And
that makes
then,
sense.
Yeah, he knew I was an engineer. So
So how has your role changed from, I'm assuming you were like an IC early on.
yeah.
And are you still an IC?
Yeah, it's hard to it's hard to say what the roles are because everyone's end up like working on a ton of different stuff. But
And so how do you guys structure, because it's a big team now, right? How many
Yeah.
people?
shoot, maybe 25 or something right around that now.
How have you seen the dynamics change going from a very small, I guess a few person startup to a now 25, 30 person?
Yeah,
team?
that's a good question. So I think definitely there's been different phases of how things have progressed. So initially, back when it was four of us, it was a lot kind of lower stakes. Everyone was working part time. It was very much just everybody was hacking on projects, working on stuff for a little bit. It wasn't as serious as you'd expect. It was sort of just fooling around, like messing with the technology. None of us really had that much expertise in Web3 development yet at that point. And so we were playing around with stuff. Then as things started to change, so the way that Thirdweb actually started was that we had worked on a couple projects. We initially settled on this one called Access Packs. And the whole idea of this is, have you seen Gary Vee's NFT collection?
VFriends?
VFriends, right?
Yeah. So with VFriends, it has this concept of like each NFT gives you different level of access to Gary Vee. So like there are some where if you own them, he'll like send you a gift every year, or you'll get access to his conference or something like that.
Yeah.
So we wanted to do this, except make it as a platform for creators to do this for their own fans. So the idea is like you would create a loot box of NFTs, and then your fans could just buy it, and they would get like a random NFT out of it. And based on that, they would have like a random chance of getting different rewards. So one of them might be like get a video call with Liam Payne, or like get free concert tickets or stuff like that.
So you guys would build it. So if I'm like Mr. Beast and I sign up, are you guys building the entire collection of NFTs?
Yeah. So in fact, it's not even really that we're building it. We built out like infrastructure for you to easily do this from a dashboard UI and just create whatever you want to, like very easily.
Yeah.
And you could just drop it to your fans.
So what happened to the project?
So we did one launch with our co-founder Stephen Bartlett's audience,
Okay.
and he's a pretty big audience. So, you know, what we realized is a couple things from that. So one, we did the drop. We actually ended up doing it twice, and
Okay.
it failed both times because way too many people came to the site at once, and we couldn't really handle like. Honestly, it was also like not just our website thing, but a blockchain thing. Like there were so many transactions at once that a lot of them were failing.
What blockchain was it?
I think it was just on mainnet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
This happened on Flow a lot. When I don't know if you guys were at Dapper Labs or
Dapper
Top
Labs.
Shot,
Yeah.
Right.
but in the inception when they'd have like waiting rooms for drops, the Flow system would just crash went on the payment system when there was too many users on it.
Do you know how they fixed it?
I think they just poured more money into development.
Interesting. From a technical standpoint, how would you fix that?
It's really difficult. I mean, it's a matter of scaling on like the actual front end side, but like we weren't really running servers particularly because it's a blockchain app, and
Yeah.
so the server / API is like the blockchain. So it's difficult to say like if these are errors coming from users just clogging up the blockchain and like making gas too high, then it's really difficult to address that type of thing.
Gotcha. So basically it didn't work because of technical like limitations. And then what happened with?
So it didn't exactly not work in the sense of like it failed and we had to move on to something. It was more like while we were building that out, we also had all this infrastructure we had built out for it. So it was like building loot boxes, building NFTs, building marketplaces, that type of thing. And so while we were building that, we spun up this side project. It was originally called No BS NFT. And the whole premise of it is you can, instead of like creating a pack, which was kind of a specific thing, we would just let you use the NFT contract that we built and deploy it yourself for your own use case and upload your own NFTs. And so I think that was kind of the start of what Thirdweb was. So it was more of like infrastructure for building a generic type of like thing with NFTs. And that actually started getting a lot of users initially, just like organically, pretty much. Like people just found it on GitHub and were playing with it. And so we had spun that out. then we took this framework. I think the core thing we did there is we let you deploy your own contract from like the browser.
Yeah.
And so we spun that out into this separate thing that we called console. And what that was is like we had a couple of these core contracts that we'd built out for access packs, like marketplaces, NFTs, tokens. And we just let you deploy those from the console. And so Furkan and Jake had at that point, like they were talking, Furkan and Jake are the CEO and CTO of the company for context. They had talked to probably in like a week or two, like 100, 200 users, just showing them this product and like repeatedly iterating on it. And so at some point we basically decided, okay, this thing looks like it has a lot of traction. Like people are using this and they're really enjoying building stuff with it. And we can see like a long term for this. Like we want to build out infrastructure and tools to help people build all this stuff that we had trouble dealing with. And so we actually just made like a unilateral decision as a team to just switch over full time to working on.
And how many users did you have at that point?
I mean, it's hard to measure, but probably around 100 to 200 as far as like people that we had talked to.
Oh, like total users.
Like total, yeah.
Oh, wow. So you guys pretty much spoke to every user.
Yeah.
Wow.
I remember, I think Furkan, actually, I think it was Jake. He was talking about like the founding story of Thirdweb, and he was mentioning that you guys would get on calls with people, and when a user would ask for a feature, he would basically say, "Yeah, it's like 2 weeks out."
Yeah, that's like the classic. That's a classic. It's almost a meme now in Thirdweb. Anything we say is 2 weeks away.
Oh, he at the talk he gave.
Yeah, at Web3SF, right?
Web3SF.
So how long was that actually a thing? Because technically you guys didn't have a lot of developers early on, right?
Yeah, it was just probably 3 or 4 of us initially.
So how do you make that work?
I mean, we did make it work, and it's still true to this day to an extent, like depending on what scope of things we're talking about. But you make it work by just, I think you can get anything done in 2 weeks, and the reason is because usually these things don't take anywhere close to that amount of time. So it's a matter of prioritization around like what do customers currently need, and then for larger features, you can get out. What it takes is pretty much like you spec out what is the actual need there, and then you can usually fit it in somewhere like within the process. So it doesn't end up taking that much time. It actually ends up being pretty feasible.
Is that still common now in terms of, are you guys still using that user feedback to create?
So if I ask for a wallet, is it 2 weeks away?
Okay, so there's different levels to this. So like customer feedback is still like the number one thing, like number one priority that we focus on. So like even if we have something in our roadmap, but we see like a bunch of customer issues that are coming up in our Discord, we'll fix that first. Like that's the number one thing. As far as like longer term feature requests, so I think the 2 week thing is more like pieces of things that are additions to our current product, like current products that we have that add functionality or improve the experience. Those are the types of things that fall into that category. As far as like large entire blocks or like new products, that obviously takes a longer time to add on. So like I would consider a wallet a new product, for example.
And so how are these products structured across the team? Is it like one person kind of leads their own project and that project is like an actual product, or is it divided into features, or how does that work?
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of ownership on the team as far as like, as long as you're like pushing forward the project and working on it and like working with kind of the resources across the team to work on your project together, then you get a lot of freedom to basically work on the project yourself, or like it can be an entire product. So like that's how we've structured it. So we currently have probably 8 or 9 products. And out of those, each product sort of has like a different owner who are actually building out these products. So for example, like one of the products I've built out is called Auth. And so there's a lot of freedom kind of to work on your own like products and build stuff out.
So with Auth, how long first off, how did, it's obviously a very like, I don't want to say basic idea, but it's like a very necessary feature.
Yeah.
So how did you first decide that was going to be the project you worked on? And then how long did it take to build out?
Yeah. So it was never really like a decision, I'm going to work on this project, because we're always working, like especially on the engineering team, because there's so many different projects. A lot of us are just working across everything. But it was more, we realized at some point that there was a need for this thing. And the reason is because background on Auth is with a lot of people who are still running servers or like backends, it's very difficult for them to interact with Web3. Because if you think about what you need to do, for example, let's say I want to drop my fans an NFT as like a skin or something like that, typical just basic gaming use case. I need to actually get the wallet address of my user. And that's not an easy task, because the way you typically connect to a website is you connect your wallet, right? And so the browser has access to your wallet address, but the server actually doesn't. And it's not secure to just send your wallet address to the server, because then I could just pretend to have any wallet address. So I could just be like, take vitalik.eth, send it to the backend, and I'll say, this is my address.
Yeah.
So you need like an actual way to prove to the backend that you own the address. And so that's what auth has done. And that unlocks a lot of new use cases where pretty much anything that requires a backend service or server side anything. So that unlocks like Stripe, integrating with AWS, Supabase, Firebase, all kinds of stuff like that. And that's what you need auth for. And what it lets you do is it's like a new login flow. So you can basically come to the website, and instead of logging in with your email or logging in with Google or something like that, you could log in with your wallet. And so it's just basically the same thing as a typical login flow, except for Web3.
And then how did you decide, like, how did you decide what features went into it, how long it would take, how long did it take?
I think it's probably been 2 months now since we've had that product, something like that. So it started out with a very simple flow, which is there's this spec called sign in with Ethereum. And this spec is basically a standardized way for a wallet address to securely sign a message. And by signing the message, they can prove to anyone that they own that wallet address. So we basically wanted to implement this feature in our auth product, but then add some stuff around it to make it like a full login flow. So speccing that out itself just took a week because obviously since it's a login flow, like there's a lot of security concerns. So we had to be sure that it was going to be like not just work for the use case, but also be secure and work for all of our needs. But once we did that, it probably took then like a week to build out. And like building out the product is not just about the code, but it's also about, for us, like we don't really consider the product to be shipped until we have like a full docs, examples around it, integrations, plugins, and then most importantly, we've actually delivered it to the customer and people are actually using it. And so that's the process that it looked like for that case.
Would you write your own docs, or do you guys have people on the team who write docs?
It's a combination of both. So like initially when you write a product or build a product, you probably have the most context on it. So it's good to be the one who like writes those initial docs and gets the information out there. But then over time, other people get familiar and they can help you with it.
Interesting. And how many devs were working on auth specifically?
So like now there's probably, as far as who's building it, I'm pretty much the only one who's built out like the product suite. And then there's people working on like examples, guides,
Gotcha.
or like building out integrations for it.
So one thing that's really interesting with Thirdweb, and you guys have gotten a lot of praise on Twitter for it, is the content strategy, right? So while a lot of Web3 companies focus on the actual tech, you guys will also have as like an equal emphasis, if not more, on like the content, how to use it, etc. How much of the team would you say is content versus engineering?
I think there's not really a division like that. So there's definitely people who are specifically dedicated towards like writing guides, writing content, making sure their docs are good. And that's sort of like their core responsibility. But I think everyone as an engineer feels like ownership over. The reason that content is important is because the thing that we care about is customers getting to success. And so like content is kind of not just the last step in that, but the most important step from the customer perspective, as far as it doesn't matter if we have all these SDKs and tools and like that type of thing. If the customer doesn't actually know how to use it, and they're not going to just like go into the code base and look at how things work. So basically the entire thing that the customer sees from their perspective is just they go look at our docs and they see what's available. And so it's important for everyone, like engineering team included, we all take ownership of like that side of things to make sure that it's done properly.
Gotcha. And then to jump back, you said you started Thirdweb you joined Thirdweb in your first year of college. What's up with college now?
I'm currently on a gap year from college. Will resume TBD.
Okay.
Maybe eternally deferred. So we'll see how that goes.
Eternally deferred. Is that what we call dropping out now?
Yeah.
I like that. Internally deferred.
Yeah.
Eternally? What is it?
Eternal deferred. Yeah.
Okay.
So where you went to Penn?
Yeah.
What made you decide to make the jump and actually take a gap?
I think I realized that a couple things. So one, I was working full time through the first 2 years of school. It was sustainable at first, at the beginning, especially at the beginning of Thirdweb, and then as we slowly gained more traction and responsibilities started to like increase, it became less and less feasible. Both from like a timing perspective, like is it actually possible to do both of these things at once? But also just social, like energy wise, it's not really feasible to do both of them. So I just decided like, all right, if I'm gonna do Thirdweb right now, then it doesn't make sense to be doing school at the same time. So yeah, I just took the gap year and then.
So if you started school in 2020, was 1 year online, 1 year in person?
It was a combination. So it was kind of a weird combo. My first term was fully online. Second term was on campus, but we were in quarantine. So everybody was on campus, but you couldn't really go out or do anything. And so of course, like when you set rules like that, the kids feel like they feel like they're being like bad by going out. So everybody's like sneaking into each other's buildings, and like there's still
Yeah.
a little bit of like underground partying. Everyone felt cool by doing it, but yeah, it was still like not much was going on.
I guess Penn, it's a little easier, right? Because you're in the city.
Yeah, the city's a little bit far away, and also Philadelphia is like a little bit less active of a city than something like New York or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's not as much going on there. But yeah, it is possible.
And then what were the like what was the thought process behind deciding, okay, Thirdweb is something that would actually work out? It makes sense to take a gap.
I think there's a couple factors I consider there. So one is learnings. So I think I realized like I was learning a ton by participating in this. And so I realized that learnings would just increase if I went on it full time, and especially came out to SF and like learned from the people who were here. And so that was a huge point, because that's kind of the reason, like that's my optimizing function right now, as far as everything I'm doing is optimized for learning like a breadth of kind of expertise across different areas. And I feel like when you join a startup where growth is happening really fast and there's super experienced people on the team, you just, especially if you're proactive about observing and learning from people who are more experienced, there's just so much learning to be had. And so if I'm in college for learning and I'm in Thirdweb for learning, and like Thirdweb learning is just much like higher at this point, then that's why that decision came about.
I asked this the same question to Eric on our last podcast, but I think you come from a different background, so the answer is probably different. Do you see there being value in a degree?
Yeah, definitely, 100%. I think this is a very case by case thing. So it's definitely unconventional in Silicon Valley and tech to think of college as like an important or valuable or necessary thing. But I'll take that perspective. And so what I'll say is it's not necessary for everyone. It's a good backup or default option, and it is necessary for some things. So I'll start with a simple example. And I think this is why tech is very skewed against college, is for computer science. You don't really learn much that's practically applicable in college. And so it seems like it's not necessary for that like domain, which is very true. So like for computer science, you don't need it. The issue is though that this idea of like college, dropping out of college is good, like college is not necessary, gets propagated. And then that has bigger consequences in something like deep tech, where in order to go deep into a deep tech field, like let's say neuroscience or AI or something like that, that's like very research heavy. It's very difficult to do that without like a formal education, because beyond just the credential, which unfortunately is important in some of these systems, it's actually, honestly, I find that at least at good schools, the education you get in those areas is actually better than something you could do on your own. And the reason is because there's this common misconception that like you can learn anything online.
Yeah.
And this is increasingly becoming true. Like it's technically possible. There's a lot of learning resources out there. The more difficult thing is it often takes structure and like an environment to learn properly. And without college, it's sort of difficult to construct that environment. There's definitely ways to do that, but like it's hard to compare with the professors and like experienced people and like peers to work with. But also more importantly, like for some areas like neuroscience, you need actual labs and equipment and stuff like that. And it's difficult to find that in places that aren't college. And so some people make the argument, this is the last thing I'll say, some people make the argument that like, if you're really resourceful, you can find those resources anywhere. And which is very true. Like you could reach out to people and find a lab and stuff like that. The thing is though, if you're already resourceful, you're the exact type of person that's going to get a ton of value from college, because college, basically what it does is it puts you in an environment with a ton of people and resources around you. And the baseline may not be that good. Like maybe the curriculum isn't great or stuff like that. But if you're able to actually be resourceful and take advantage of the resources, it can be an extreme accelerator as far as like the networks, opportunities, that type of thing. So, yeah.
So is your decision for going back to college fully based on whether or not you want to dive into like neuroscience or ML in the future?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think there's a couple factors in it. So it's definitely about, long term. The way I view college is if I want to build technical expertise in something, then I'll probably go back at some point, if that's an option. But otherwise, it may not make sense to do that.
Gotcha. And then kind of have to ask this, since you're 19, what did your parents think about you taking a gap / do they know you might not go back?
Yeah, I think they're completely fine with everything. I'm pretty lucky with like, honestly, I owe a lot of my like anything to my parents. It's because they're very smart, very supportive, and they understand. So they don't necessarily want me to not go to college. Like they obviously would prefer if I did, but they trust that if I'm making a decision, it will probably be like the one that's best for me.
Gotcha. No, that's cool.
How does your philosophy shift on that? Obviously before you went to college, how was your experience here, even being at F Inc? How has that changed your perception of the networking aspect of it? So the technical part makes sense, right? In terms of there are certain subjects that are beneficial. How do you the whole aspect of you go to college to build a network? We hear that for business all the time, right? You go to build a community. Can you speak a little bit to that and just your experience at F Inc. and maybe how some of that has accelerated your ability to build a good network?
Yeah. So I think there's two sides to this. So I'll talk about first SF and then F Inc. as like a bubble inside SF. So I think coming to SF, very common experience for like young tech founder builder types. Like a lot of kids come to SF, especially during gap years.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of a jarring experience for a lot of people, especially if you're not like in a school that's in the community. And the reason is because the peer group here is a lot older. So like there's not as many people. During the summer, it's not like this. But once you get into the actual school year, a lot of people that are like my age are no longer here. And so you end up having a community of people around you that's much older. And so I see this with a lot of my friends who are my age in SF.
Yeah.
Is they find it difficult to find a peer group. And they also gain a lot of appreciation. In fact, I've seen this so many times where people who have either dropped out of college or are not even going to college, they never went to college, and they're pursuing like a founder route, actually end up slightly regretting it or like considering what if I went to college. And I think one of the biggest reasons for that is in this environment, one, it can get toxic as far as like there's a lot of people doing a lot of cool things here, and it's easy to feel like, I don't know, get caught up in the hype, for example. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is like lack of a peer group that's your age. And that just makes you appreciate that type of, so it's not just about network, but more like experiencing life or like a community of people that's around your demographic.
Do you have like, because you've been here for a while now, do you have like your set peer group?
Yeah, I would say, so my house is one of them. I live in a house with like a lot of cool founders. There's a lot of people my age in my like community.
Which house?
It's called Genesis.
Genesis, okay.
Yeah, it's in SF City, and then there's like a sister house in South SF.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but so there's a lot of good people there. Still, like, definitely lots of good friends there.
Yeah.
Still, most of the people are significantly older. So that's still like a thing. You get used to it, but that's just something you appreciate about college. Yeah, but then I would say F Inc. is a little bit different than the rest of SF. And the reason is because when you create an environment like this with a ton of tech wealth and like tech success and stuff like that, and a lot of VC, you create a climate of, honestly, it's like you create a climate of, it's almost like a new hierarchy, except the hierarchy is now based on tech and like VC funding and status and stuff like that. And this type of thing is kind of unavoidable. So it's not like an inherently bad thing. Same thing happens in New York with finance.
Yeah.
But the reason I draw that analogy is in SF, I think startup and VC is the thing that frames that. And so there's a lot of people who either feel like they have to work on a startup or are founding for the wrong reasons, or, you know, are pursuing raise instead of actually trying to build something. And so it kind of creates this environment that's a little bit harmful to founders if you're in it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
Because it can make you sort of optimize for the wrong things. And the reason I bring that up is because Founders Inc. is almost a unique bubble away from that I haven't seen in many places in SF. And the reason is because it has this culture of just overwhelmingly focused on shipping, as in just like build the product. And that kind of like staves off all of those issues, because now people are just completely focused on if you ship products. So there's no more like, did you get money? Did you like raise, that type of thing? Because it's just you shipped or didn't. And then I think that causes a lot of the people in the community to just be like, everyone's super down to earth and focused on the right things when it comes to like starting a company.
That's an interesting point. So you were already very technical. You already had startup experience before joining Thirdweb. How do you make the distinction between whether or not it makes sense to start your own thing or to join an existing startup?
Right. So I think there's benefits to both of these, and I'll sort of lay out like what do I think are the different cases here. So I think starting your own startup is always a great option. Massive learnings. I think depending on what stage you get to, that's also sort of the limiting function of how much you learn, because at each stage of a startup, the learnings are very different, and you get to learn how to solve different types of problems, and you can carry that forward to anything you do. I think the important thing with starting a startup that I often see go wrong, and is unfortunate that it's an issue, is like when you're starting a startup, it's very rare that the first thing you ever do is going to be successful. it's often the case that like you'll have to start 5, 10, 15 things before you hit the one that's like actually successful and you like working on it, stuff like that. And so what I see is often for people who don't really know what to optimize for, or they're optimizing for the wrong things, maybe something doesn't work out, but they get sufficiently far in it where it feels like a failure to them. And so I think the important takeaway there is like, it's difficult to do this, but it's important that you don't attach your own self-worth or success to like the success of your startup. Because I see a lot of times people will like raise money for a startup and then work on it for like 1 or 2 years. And then it ends up failing because the market wasn't there or, something like that. But then they get demoralized and like downtrodden as a founder and they sort of just give up and get in like a bad state. Whereas the real thing there is like, you're a founder, you made something work for 2 years and you've gotten a ton of experience. So now you're just that much more primed to start your own thing. And so that's one distinction I'll make there between starting your own company and working on something is like, I think there's a phenomenon definitely where founder types who are working in companies is sort of variant depending on what type of company you're working in, have this like ambition once they're coming out to start their own thing, like carry forward the learnings that you took and start your own thing, which is a big plus. Especially, I think this is a little bit different than the situation I'm in, but people who are working in big tech, which the learnings are definitely not as much there for like startup learnings. But the one thing I've seen there that's beneficial is people have this like brutal understanding of how these big systems work and how they really like just do not want to have to operate in those systems. And so they come out with this fire that they like need to start something and make it work. And that's created a lot of good things that I've seen.
So you're saying that motivates them to start their own company?
Yeah, exactly. Because I think startup honestly is more a function of how much do the founders actually care about the problem and solving it and how motivated are they than like any other specifics there. Like I think founder burnout is one of the worst, like founders getting tired of a problem or like not really cared about it to begin with and they were just doing it for clout or status or whatever is one of the biggest killers of companies I've seen.
I guess we don't talk about that enough, right? Just founder burnout or that in general, like specific use cases and how to not only avoid as what you're saying, but everyone celebrates the wins.
Yeah.
I think a
10-year overnight success.
Yeah, 10-year. We always like to say that, like companies like, Figma, Slack, whatever it is.
It feels like they came around 2-3 years ago and you see when they were founded and it's always 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's like it goes back to the point of mental health. And we'll get into this too in terms of the philosophy. I mean, you're very interested in that aspect. But in terms of that culture and tech in general, do you see anything where it can be improved or the next generation kind of can lead that way in terms of mental health and founding a company?
Yeah, I think the best thing I've seen right now is just networks of founders kind of support each other because every founder has sort of been through like, it's a super stressful situation necessarily to put yourself in because you're basically, especially depending on like what background you're coming from, you're banking your entire life and future on like the success of your current project. And so obviously super stressful situation. And every time anything goes wrong with your company, it feels like your entire life is going wrong.
Yeah.
And so super stressful for a lot of founders. And I've seen this play out time and time again. And I think the things that have really helped the most are either this is again, going back to why I think caring about the problem is so important because I think there's kind of two different frameworks for how I've seen young founders think about companies they're working on. And so one of them is like, oh, I'm going to work on this company. It's going to be a huge success. I'm going to become a millionaire. I'm going to become famous. Like this is going to be my like sick success. And they're thinking about like the future that they want versus there's people who are like thinking about a problem like, oh, I really need to solve, I don't know, like I need to build a BCI neurotech type thing. And that's what they're passionate about. And so I think these two things play out very differently when it comes into stressful situations. So when you come to a stressful situation and you're in like the first mindset of just being focused on status, the thing you're more concerned about is like you're worried that you banked everything on this goal of achieving status. And like if this fails, then you failed at that goal. And so it's super stressful.
Yeah.
Because that's what you're chasing, right? You don't care about the thing that you're working on. And it also leads to a lot of doubt in what you're working on, right? Because it's like if something isn't working, then you think, oh, maybe this isn't the thing that like that's going to get me there. And so I think it just creates a lot of like bad effects on starting a company versus people who are focused on a specific goal and they're just trying to build a sick product to do something specific. Problems don't approach problems in the same way. Like problems are more like, okay, this is the next obstacle. How do I get past this? Rather than like, shoot, this is like throwing a shoe in all my plans and like this is messing everything up.
Yeah.
And I think they have a lot more like resolve in that way, what I've seen.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess one thing that I've always heard is like if you pick the right problem, or if you work on, the more general statement is if you do something you enjoy, it'll feel like you never have to work a day in your life. But I feel like that's been proven 100 times over that that's just not true.
I don't think that's true at all.
Yeah.
I think the way it's framed is incorrect in terms of tricking someone into thinking, oh, every minute of this should be enjoyable, and if it's not, then I need to do something else.
Right.
Does that make sense?
But for you, like you obviously enjoy what you're doing at Thirdweb, and so my question is, what do the bad days look like versus maybe someone who doesn't exactly care about the project they're working on?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I can tell you what the good and bad days look like, then maybe reframe it after
Sure.
that. So like a good day is like tons of users using a product, or maybe we have a product launch or some big launch. We're getting a ton of like attention on Twitter and interaction. All our charts are going up. Like it's basically like a spike in the charts. So it's like tons of users coming in. Bad day is like, I can give you a specific example. So recently we just rolled out a new storage product.
Okay.
And so that's for decentralized storage. And so there was a couple bugs in it. And because we use storage across our entire product, those bugs propagated to our entire product. And like there was tons of users who were just, stuff was breaking for them left and right. Super stressful scenario for everyone. So everybody's just like scrambling to fix stuff and try to figure out what all these little issues were. But yeah, that's like kind of the difference. So it's more like stress versus less stressful scenario.
Do you ever go through days where it feels like you're wasting your time by working on what you're working on?
I don't think wasting my time ever. And the reason is because everything, like as long as you have the higher direction in mind, which for me is like learning about startups so I can do my own thing in the future, then it's hard to feel like you're wasting your time on anything, because learnings are always coming as far as like you see any specific scenario or you're able to observe other parts of the organization. And so, yeah, it's just difficult for that.
What does an average day in your life look like?
Weekday?
Yes.
All right. So I'll wake up, meditate, and then get out of bed, read probably for like an hour. And then I'll come to work and I'll just like, at the beginning of the day, I lay out like everything I want to get done. So like, because we all work on a couple different products, there's often like a big variety of different things to work on. So yeah, come to Founders Inc., work on that stuff, play Smash, and then go home, and then most of the stuff for the rest of the day is social.
Social. Oh, because you live in a
group house.
So you like to keep that balance.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool. And then you said you read for an hour every morning. Are these books? Are these articles?
Always books. So like I'll read articles and stuff, but not during that time slot.
What's your favorite book?
Oh, that's such a hard choice. Fiction or nonfiction?
Let's go with both.
Fiction, I would say Flowers for Algernon is up there.
What's it about?
It's about this rat named Algernon and then this dude who I forgot his name somehow. But basically the premise is the dude is like autistic or something like that. But he undergoes this surgery to like get intelligence back. So
Okay.
like it's like some new research, and they do this surgery to him, and he gets more intelligent over time. But then something with the surgery goes wrong. But the reason the book is so sick is because it's written like as if it was written by him. So like you see how he writes at first, and he's clearly like you could tell that he's autistic,
Okay.
and like you can see how he thinks.
Interesting.
And then you can see him getting smarter over time, and then you can see the effects of the surgery. And the great thing about it is that there was clearly a lot of care put into how the main character and his interactions with everyone are written, because in the same way that in real life, there's like little things you can pick up on that people do, like body language or their tone or the way they say things. And that gives you insight into like the actual character. The author clearly put a lot of thought into like that same thing for her own characters. And so every character says like little things or gives off little things where you can like psychoanalyze it. And there's like a consistent theme across all these where you can like see personality patterns building up. But super interesting. And then it's also just like a really good story of what happens. Pretty sad story.
Where does the rat come from?
It's like a rat from a research lab. The reason the rat is relevant is because they do the experiment on the rat first to test it out, and the rat gets smarter. And then so they do it on the dude. But then a couple months out, they see something happening to the rat, and they're like, oh shit, we did not validate this enough. And then it starts to happen to the dude too.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Sounds like Ratatouille, but a lot more. It's a lot more philosophical.
Yeah. Maybe.
Okay. And then what's your favorite nonfiction? I just want to move away from that as fast as possible.
Nonfiction, that's a tough choice. I think There's a couple. I think Life 3.0 is a great one.
What's it about?
So that's about AI. I read this at a point where, so I worked on AI for 2 years, a little over that. And I became a little bit bearish on AI, not as like a long-term thing, but as like a AI and industry, how it's being used today. And the reason is because at that point, that was kind of during / a little bit after the AI hype cycle, where like AI was just getting used as a buzzword and thrown into everything.
Which hype cycle? The 2019 one, or?
No, it was like 2016.
Okay.
It was a little after 2016. And so during that time, AI was just getting thrown into everything, and every company was just using it. Like, this is our state of the art AI for X. And like, if you look at what the AI is actually doing, it was like very much not adding much value, or it wasn't actually, it would be like 60% success rate. And so at that point, I was like, oh, AI, it's like a buzzword. Like, clearly there's real use cases at that point too.
Yeah.
But a lot of it was kind of like stuff to filter through. And so I read this book. The book is about artificial general intelligence, which is like a super pie in the sky, like very long-term vision for AI, although it's becoming more and more like a reality now. But super well written. So the book starts out with this description. It's really cool. Like, I would recommend anyone just to read like the first chapter of the book. So it starts out with this description. And the idea is basically these people have figured out how to create an artificial general intelligence. And what that means is like, it's an AI that's not just meant for a specific task, but it's just like a human. It can reason about and think about any topic and learn about any topic. But because it's a computer, it has much more thinking power than a human. And so instead of making this AGI public and making it like public news, this organization instead decides to use it for their own enterprise, like secretly, and spinning up all these different products around it. And so the first chapter goes through basically, and it shows how these people are secretly making different parts of their organization and how it's like spreading throughout the world and influencing the world without the world realizing. And so it's like showing how all these different parts of life change because of AGI without you even realizing that it's happening.
But this is a nonfiction book, right?
Yes, nonfiction. So this is like it's a thought experiment at the beginning.
Gotcha.
And then it goes into like actual AI research and ethics and stuff like that.
So, I mean, I guess you mentioned that, I guess at that time you were kind of bearish on AI in the industry. Are you still?
No, definitely not.
Okay, because I was going to say there was a tweet that I saw that went viral. And it was like, if you just add blockchain, if you try to fit blockchain into your product, the actual like usefulness is a lot less than if you were to just try to fit AI into your product.
Yeah, that's probably true on like a general basis.
Do you see a basis where it's not true off the top of your head?
I mean, there's obviously like specific types of products where blockchain is much more useful than AI and the reverse. But I think AI is just a much more general system. Like decentralization, like blockchain and Web3 technology, I would say the core value of that is decentralization. And decentralization offers specific value in specific places. And in those places, it offers a lot of value. But there's also areas where it doesn't really make sense. And that's sort of what I was saying before. Whereas AI is more just about how do we automate intelligence? And intelligence is a much more broadly applicable thing. Like every problem that humans are currently working on, technically AI falls into that category as far as like what it could do in the future. And so I think it's just definitionally way more broadly applicable.
Well, I got your Twitter pulled up here.
Oh, no.
Well, first of all, why are you from Antarctica?
Oh,
is that what your location says?
Yeah, my location says Antarctica.
Why?
I don't know. I think I was just moving around a lot at that point, and I just decided this is something that I saw on Scratch like a long time ago. One of my favorite. This was like when I was super young. One of my favorite creators on Scratch put their location as Antarctica because they like were moving around a lot and they didn't have like a specific location, so they just put it as a troll. So I just did that too.
That's what you put?
Better than putting the metaverse.
Yeah, for real.
But I like this one. This tweet you had recently. Convinced Legos are the gateway drug to engineering.
Oh no. Yeah. So the reasoning behind this one is I just gotten one of my friends a Lego set, and it was crazy watching them put it together. This is their first Lego set ever. And
wait, how old is this person?
My age. Like
okay.
18. Yeah. And they were like, it took up their whole day. They were like super enthusiastic about it.
Just a regular Lego set?
What Lego set did you get that took up their whole day?
It was a Harry Potter. It was like 1,000 pieces Harry Potter Lego set.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I was thinking back to me and like how I started doing a lot of stuff with Legos. And so when I was younger, I used to play with Legos a ton. Like me and my brother used to build a ton of stuff with Legos. And I was thinking back to like the engineering process of building with Legos.
Yeah.
And I realized that it has so many, like the way that I use Legos has so many analogs to how the engineering process works. And I think it honestly is what like got me into robotics and coding and all kinds of stuff like that. Like
really?
Genuinely. And the reason is because when I think about how I used to play with Legos, it's like I would always have a goal in mind of something I want to build. Like I would generally like think of something that I want to create, and then it's like it's like a problem solving process, figuring out how to actually do that with the pieces you have. Because like there's a difference between having a Lego set where like it's just instructions and you put things together.
Yeah.
Versus like for my brother's birthday, my dad got us
Those big boxes.
it wasn't a big, it was just like a random ass like box of a random assortment of Legos and like gears and stuff from
Yeah.
like Craigslist or something like that. Just like super random. But it honestly made us a lot more creative / had to think more because there wasn't a specific thing we could do with it. So we just had to look at what we had. And so like some examples of things we built is like we realized that we had this special piece called a worm gear. And what it lets you do is like it lets you connect two axles together, but in a way where they're not actually like strongly connected. So like if I have them, they'll be like here. But if I lift this one up, this one won't come with it.
Interesting.
So what we realized is this lets us. Do you guys remember Beyblade?
Yeah.
All right. So we realized that we can make a Beyblade spinner with that because you can basically have like
Interesting.
one axle and you could put a motor on it and like gear it up and spin
Yeah.
it really
Oh,
fast.
yeah.
And you have a top on this side.
Yeah.
So you get it to spin really fast and then you lift it up and the top stays spinning. So we made like Beyblade spinners and we used to like fight them against each other.
That's dope.
But just stuff like that where it's like you never really know what you can do and then you like come up with an idea and you actually have to implement it. And that's basically like the core of the engineering process.
That's interesting because see, when I was growing up, my parents were very strict when it came to like my Wi-Fi, screen time, all that. So what I would do is just play with Legos all the time.
Oh, so you're a Lego guy.
Yeah, huge.
Okay.
But the problem is, or the difference is, I would play with Legos all the time. I also read a lot when I was growing up, but I hated programming like with a passion until literally this year. And I think part of the reason I hated it so much is because I actually self-taught programming, but I think I skipped all the fundamentals. I just went straight to tutorials. And so when I tried building anything, it didn't work and I couldn't understand why it didn't work. And there was like that concept of the skill gap, right? For you to get better at something, it has to still be within a realm of you understanding it. But I had like learned the foundations completely wrong. So basically I just hated programming. But I used to love building Legos. So I don't know where the difference is there.
That's an interesting. So I think your experience with programming is more analogous to like if you had a class in school for Legos and they were like teaching you all the things. They're like, look, there's like bricks with 2 studs, there's bricks with 4 studs. You put them together like this. Like it's very formulaic.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to actually find like the fun in it versus coming up with something that you want to do.
Yeah.
And then doing that. And so that's how I think everyone I've seen that like likes programming today, they never came into it from like the experience of tutorials or like a coding boot camp or a class in school.
Yeah.
But more like they had something in mind that they wanted to build. And then they like were slowly just searching stuff online, figuring out how to do it, like going through the painful process of like 5 hours of debugging, not understanding why it's working because you care enough about the thing that you're building. And so, yeah, I had something like that, for example.
I mean, that's exactly like, that's what I was trying to do. So this is when I was trying to build like my first ever startup, which was literally a social app to meet friends, which everyone has done as their first project. And so I was just using so at one point, I think I said this on the last episode, but I built an app which was half TypeScript and half JavaScript without realizing it.
Oh no.
So that gives you I was in a JavaScript file trying to use TypeScript and I couldn't figure out why it didn't work.
All right. I think the other asterisk I'll add is you can't do like a full stack web app. Like nobody's going to have fun programming if you're building like an application like that.
Yeah.
Like it has to be like it has to be like a little side project or something that you can play with. Like mine was like a text adventure builder. And so like
text adventure builder.
Yeah. I think we talked about this last time. So it was like, basically I built an engine where you can create text adventure games where basically like it's just a little terminal and you like type in commands to it and it would tell you like a whole story and it's like a choose your own adventure type thing. And I built like a fantasy adventure with that, but that was super fun for me.
I guess that makes sense. Yeah, probably just because I learned the fundamentals like completely wrong and yeah.
Fair enough.
So I'm sorry. I'm on your blog.
We just really dug in.
It's a really good blog because in tech we don't talk about a lot of this. Herd instinct. I don't want to go too much. Can you explain? Give us a broad stroke of herd instinct.
Okay, so herd instinct is the concept obviously based off of like herds of sheep and the idea, or like lemmings. And the idea is that your baseline beliefs are most highly impacted by the environment that you're around if you don't intentionally make an effort for this not to be the case. And so this kind of ties back to what I was saying about SF before, where like whatever environment you're in, it's difficult not to at least partially adopt the kind of like group metrics and status symbols and success symbols and stuff like that. And so what that prevents is like you thinking independently. And this happens in a lot of different areas. So of course it applies in like tech and startups, as I mentioned before. Then in the context of the blog post I was talking about with philosophy, which is something that's a lot more unintuitive, and gets into a lot more like very difficult to to agree with concept, which is that the way that most people view the world is very rooted in how society views the world. And that base way of viewing the world has a lot of holes in it and a lot of things that aren't exactly accurate. The reason I'm beating around the bush here without like referencing it directly is because it's sort of difficult to talk about these things in like a direct way.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's herd instinct.
And you have this thing, you're basically talking about purpose, right? And how people derive purpose. And there's simple things you have here, like, parents say, children bring meaning to your lives, or love brings meaning to your lives. And, happiness statements talking about, is there a point to existence?
Okay, so this is an interesting one. I think this is a question that a lot of people wrestle with, at least at some point in their lives. I think this is also the definition of a midlife crisis. It's like when people kind of step back and they realize like, oh shit, I've been like focusing on my career this entire time, and I've been like tunnel visioned on these specific aspects of my life. And then I zoom out and I think, what have I done with my life? Like what
And then you buy a Ferrari.
Yeah, exactly. And then you buy a Ferrari and that's like the classic outlet. And so the thing you have to ask yourself is, okay, so you're stepping back and you're questioning. This happens at different ages for different people. You're questioning, what have I done with my life? Is any of this going to have any meaning? And so the first thing you can go to is a very bleak view. And the bleak view is, all right, let's zoom out. We live on the earth. I'm 1 in a billion people on the earth. I will probably have like, even if I have a massive impact like Elon Musk, I'm impacting like this little dot in the universe. Does this little dot even matter? Like in the grand scheme of things? Like what
Elon, you heard that? He just took a shot.
Yeah, for real. Like, why does it matter? Why does it matter what we do on this little dot? And why does it matter? Like, especially, okay, you're going to die in like 70, 80 years, maybe longer if human longevity works. Is anything going to have any meaning after that from an inherent perspective? And the answer that a lot of people come to, whether they like it or not, is no, probably. Like a lot of these things in the grand scheme of things, depending on how far you zoom out, a lot of these things are not going to have any specific meaning in the sense of like, there's this well-defined thing in the universe, meaning and purpose, and I can have something like that. And so what a lot of people come to in that case is this thing called nihilism, where they just like think that nothing has any meaning and nothing matters. They become super negative. But I think that's actually the wrong way to think about it. And the reason is because if you zoom out even farther, you think, okay, so I was asking what meaning is there? And I came to the conclusion that there is none. But then you have to ask yourself, why are you looking for meaning in the first place? Like, why do we have this need to create this question of like, what is my purpose or what is meaning? And then you realize that like, it's actually a very arbitrary thing. And so what that lets you do is then, because you agree that there's no like inherent well-defined answer to this question, it gives you the freedom to define what that means for yourself. So maybe like at an individual level, you think that like good relationships or creating value for humanity or helping people or whatever is like your personal value. And that's what makes you feel like most fulfilled. It opens up the door to like you defining that framework for yourself and then creating like following that framework, not because you think that it's inherently true and everyone should be doing this, but because you've basically just admitted to yourself, okay, there's nothing that's inherently the best thing to do, but I choose this thing and I'm just going to do it because I like it. And that's what's called optimistic nihilism, which is like acceptance of the fact that nothing inherently matters, but then you can just rebuild your own framework of what matters and use that to align what you do.
So would you consider yourself an optimistic nihilist?
Yeah, it's not like a mutually exclusive category, as in like I'm not that and then not other things.
Yeah.
It's more just like a principle that I agree with.
Gotcha.
Now, Omar, really important question for you.
No.
Do you feel that your life has any meaning whatsoever?
Yes. I think so. Interesting. Well, for me, it's like I'm religious, so I believe in the afterlife.
Yeah.
And so that's like purpose right there.
Yeah, that's the asterisk. So this is for people who are not specifically religious, because this is basically in place of religion. A lot of people are struggling to find a framework to like ascribe meaning to. Religion is nice because religion adds like that type of framework.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you, Vishal, do you think your life has any meaning?
Sure. I mean, I'm on this podcast.
If this podcast is your meaning for life, dude, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I'm on it. It's great, but meaning for life, I don't know.
There's nothing beyond these four walls.
That's deep.
That wall is see-through. You know that, right?
I guess you got me there.
Adam, do you feel like your life has any meaning?
Yeah, because I've defined my own frameworks for what I care about. And those are like, I care about people and relationships with people. I care about helping people. And then I also care about just creating like something sick that a lot of people get value from. So like, that's just the equivalent of building a cool product.
How do you develop that? So obviously we can talk about reading, right? We can talk about, I know you talk about meditation, all these things, but I feel like a lot of people abuse these teachings and terms to not only sell clicks, but just to push their own agenda. Like I feel like it's almost herd, like this is herd
Definitely.
stuff at this point.
Definitely.
So it's like, can you talk about, especially as a young person, how do you build this framework? And how do you make sure it's distinct and you're not being influenced?
That's a great question. So I would say there's kind of two principles that I would say are the most baseline principles to follow in order to develop not just your frameworks for what you care about, but also your understanding of the world and like how you see things. And the two principles are open-mindedness and skepticism, and those cover everything. And the reason is because So there's a couple pieces to this. So you always start out with like a baseline view of how you see things, and it's almost inevitable that that view is wrong, and it's almost inevitable that that view is always going to be at least partially wrong. As far as like there's some things about how you see the world that are not correct, and so your goal is to basically optimize that towards the truth as in how things are. And the way you can do that is basically by constantly being skeptical of your own views and trying to figure out what the holes in your views are. And so that's like an obvious piece. And that can't go too far though, of course, because this is where open-mindedness comes in, is there's always views coming into your like awareness. So for example, religions are a set of views, or like philosophies are a set of views. And sometimes these views will be so different from your worldview that they don't make sense. So for example, for an atheist, religion is that. Like an atheist, like religion, that sounds so stupid. Like that doesn't make sense to me. And similarly for a religious person, an atheist seems like that, right?
Yeah.
And so people are just so opposed, like because they see the world in this very concrete way that's well defined by their beliefs, it's almost difficult for them to consider other perspectives because their perspective is just so solidified. And the thing I like to say there is people misconstrue their perception of reality with reality itself. As in like, they think that the little view of reality in their head is how things actually work. And so where open-mindedness comes in is you can have your own set of how things work, and that's fine. But you need to be willing to give other people the time of day, or give other perspectives the time of the day to consider them.
Yeah.
And the reason is because that's how like philosophical and personal growth happens, is like you find other perspectives outside of your own, even if they're super different from your own, but you really have to try to consider them and understand like, okay, what is the core piece of what they're trying to say?
Yeah.
And then, that's why they're kind of balancing act, because I like to think of truth as like a tree trunk. And so like you start off at the bottom of the tree trunk, and open-mindedness and skepticism kind of correspond with like moving up the trunk. So like if you're moving up the trunk, that corresponds with like seeing more and more perspectives. Like if you could think of each branch as the perspective and you're trying to get to the top. So if you're too open-minded, you'll just like go into one of these branches, which is like a little side perspective, and you'll just get caught there because you're just like way too, oh my God, this new thing I found out about is so true and amazing. I'm just going to subscribe to it.
It's like watching YouTube conspiracy theory videos.
Exactly.
And you watch like 3 hours and are convinced.
Exactly.
Like the earth is flat.
Exactly. So that's like too far on the open-mindedness side. Then the skepticism side is like you just keep going in your like your own direction. You stay in your little area, and then you look at all the branches and you're like, nope, none of these are true. And you just don't progress at all. And so that's why it takes open-mindedness to go like explore the branches and see what makes sense. But then it takes skepticism to be like, okay, I actually don't agree with this part. And you go back up and like progress through the tree.
So in your life, what's the hardest perspective you've ever had to reconsider?
I would say from a philosophical perspective, like my worldview has changed drastically in the past like 3 to 4 years. I started out as very much like a rationalist with a very material worldview, as in not material as in materialistic, but material as in like I thought of everything very almost like science. Science is my worldview, as in like anything that's not explained by science, I don't believe. As in, and this is a very common thing, right? That seems honestly pretty reasonable to most people. It's just like, yeah, that makes sense. Scientific, Like that's pretty much analogous with the truth. And what you realize when you zoom out and look at science is like, science is just a set of principles that are meant to describe how things are. So like the truth of the world. But science is always advancing and it's expanding how much of the world it actually understands. And so like if you zoom back maybe 200, 300 years ago, like probably more than that, when like physics, chemistry, biology didn't exist. And that's when you see things like people not believing Galileo when he said like there's other planets and stuff like that, because it's not scientific yet, as in we don't yet understand it. So we think that it's like fantastical. And I think realizing this has completely changed my view on what I see as reasonable. So to give a concrete example of this, people talk about all kinds of crazy experiences they have with like meditation, like, oh, I experienced like senselessness or timelessness or stuff like that. Or more classically, and especially in SF, psychedelics. Those things are not yet explainable by science because we don't understand them yet. And I mean, frankly, we don't really understand how the brain works yet at all either. But that doesn't mean that you can completely discount all the value that these things have to offer just because we don't understand it yet. So I think that's kind of just like a small example of the change in framework, which is reframing truth and what I understand the truth to be, not around specifically science, but like around what makes sense. And that's disjoint from science and pure logic.
Interesting. That's a lot.
Yeah, definitely a lot.
I see. Now I'm just thinking.
Yeah.
I guess that might be a good place to
end the episode.
Just leave him thinking.
Yeah. No, actually, my brain's kind of fried right now.
I mean, is any of this important at all?
We're in four walls. There's nothing outside of these four walls.
Nothing outside of these four walls.
Nothing outside these four walls.
Apart from the entire Founders Inc.
Yeah. Damn, dude. This was a really good episode. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, this was awesome.
Where can people find you on social media?
Twitter at Majmudar Adam. It's probably have to spell it out somewhere, but
I'll put a little card right somewhere over your head.
Put it, yeah.
Yeah, and then adammaj.com is my personal website.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in with us. My brain is clearly still fried, as you can see. Make sure you subscribe, leave a like, whatever you're supposed to do on podcasts, and we will see you next week.
Peace.
Peace.